If you had asked me a year ago what betrayal looked like, I might have said a lie, a broken promise, a stranger's name whispered in the dark. But I never would have said it wore my sister's face. I never would have imagined that the knife would come from someone who once braided my hair and held my hand when I was afraid of the dark. Betrayal is an ugly word. It tastes like iron and regret. But this story, my story, started quietly. It started with laughter over dinner, with small glances and long silences, with tiny questions I kept swallowing because asking them felt too dangerous. The truth didn't come all at once. It came like a leak, slow and steady, until everything I'd built started to rot from the inside. I married Matthew 7 years ago in a sun-drenched ceremony filled with lanterns, laughter, and champagne toasts that lasted too long. My sister, Olivia, stood beside me in a blush satin dress, her hand tight in mine. Everyone said we looked like twins, but I'd always thought that was generous. She had the kind of beauty that unsettled people, tall, sharp, all edges and elegance, the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. I was softer, quieter, the kind of woman men grew to appreciate after meeting Olivia first. But I never minded. She was my sister. She was my person. Or so I thought. After I married Matthew, life got busy. We bought a house, focused on careers, tried to carve out something lasting in a world that made permanence feel mythical. Olivia floated in and out, sometimes crashing on our couch, sometimes disappearing for months. She was always chasing something. New jobs, new men, new cities. But she always came back. And when she did, she brought chaos and glitter, and I welcomed it because she was family. Because love means you make space. But space has limits. And somewhere along the way, Olivia stopped asking where the line was. It began small. Her calling Matthew Maddie, touching his arm when she laughed, wearing my robe in the kitchen while he made coffee. I told myself it was harmless. Olivia flirted with everyone. That was just how she was. But the way Matthew looked at her started to change. And the way she looked back, that terrified me more. When we started trying for a baby, the cracks deepened. Months passed. Nothing happened. Every period felt like failure. I tracked every ovulation window, took every supplement, clung to hope until it turned bitter in my throat. Sex became a routine, not romance. A means to an end. And Matthew began to withdraw. First emotionally, then physically. He stopped joking, stopped touching, stopped trying. I thought maybe he was grieving in his own way. Maybe we just needed time. Then Olivia showed up on our doorstep, mascara streaked and half drunk, whispering something about a breakup and needing just a week to get back on her feet. I should have said no. I should have told her we were already stretched thin. But I let her in. Because she was my sister. Because I believed, even then, that love could outweigh suspicion. The first few days were fine. Olivia played the role of the considerate guest, doing laundry, cooking, asking about my job. Matthew smiled more that week than he had in months. I tried to ignore how often he looked at her, how he laughed at her jokes in a way he hadn't laughed at mine in a long time. I told myself it was good for him, that we needed levity. But one night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and Matthew wasn't in bed. I found him on the couch, alone, watching TV. He said he couldn't sleep. I nodded. But Olivia's bedroom door was closed. And the air smelled faintly like my perfume, the one she always claimed gave her headaches. A week became 2. Then 3. Olivia didn't leave. She said she was looking for apartments, but nothing was safe. She said she was saving up, but I'd catch her browsing designer handbags. One morning, I found her in my favorite sleep shirt. My shirt. Matthew was making her eggs. She kissed his cheek. I laughed it off. Pretended it didn't happen. Because the alternative meant admitting something unthinkable. The final straw came late one Thursday. I came home early, phone dead, a client meeting canceled last minute. I opened the door and heard nothing.
No te ve. No voices.
Just silence. I dropped my bag and walked upstairs. The air felt heavier, perfumed. I reached the guest room and stopped. The door wasn't all the way closed. I pushed it gently. What I saw is something I'll never unsee. Matthew was there. So was Olivia. They were half naked, wrapped in sheets that I had folded, in a room where we had once played card games as kids. My husband, my sister, together, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Matthew's face went pale. He scrambled. Olivia didn't move. She met my gaze and held it. She didn't look ashamed. She didn't cry. She just smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made me want to scream. But I didn't. I turned, walked out, drove for 45 minutes in silence. Ended up outside the only house I knew I'd hate myself for visiting, my mother's. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask a thing. Just let me in. I sat at the kitchen table, shaking, staring at her favorite vase of lilies. I asked one question. Did you know?
She didn't respond. She didn't have to.
The look in her eyes said it all. She had known. Maybe not the details, but the truth? She had felt it. And she had said nothing. I walked out without another word. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive as an explosion. Sometimes it shows up in whispers, in silence, in the people who choose not to stop it.
I didn't sleep that night.
After I left my mother's house, I sat in my car in the dark for almost 2 hours, parked outside the old Vietnamese bakery I used to love as a child. The sign flickered like it always had, half-lit in blue neon. I watched people come and go. Couples, families, 2 old men playing Chinese chess under a plastic tarp. The world moved on like nothing had happened. But everything inside me had cracked open, hollow and aching and sharp around the edges. When I finally drove home, the house was dark. Matthew's car was gone. Olivia's bedroom door was open. I didn't go inside. I didn't want to know what was missing, what had been left behind. Instead, I crawled into my bed alone, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because I was too numb to even bleed. The next morning, I texted Matthew just one word, keys. He replied, I left them in the mailbox. I'll give you space. Space? He thought space was the problem? No apology. No denial. No explanation. Just space. Olivia didn't message me at all. Not that I expected her to. But still, something in me twisted at her silence. I kept hearing her laugh in my head, that smug smile as I caught her in my own bed with my own husband, and I kept thinking, she looked like she'd won something. I took the rest of the week off work. I told my manager I had a family emergency, which wasn't even a lie. I didn't explain further. I ignored every call, even the ones from friends, especially the ones from my dad. The only one I answered came 2 days later from my mother. She didn't say hi. She didn't say my name. She just said, you should come by. We need to talk. I almost laughed. I wanted to scream into the phone. Now you want to talk? Now, after months of watching this happen under your nose, or worse, behind my back? But instead I said, fine. I arrived an hour later. She was in the kitchen, making tea like it was just another Sunday morning. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Just poured 2 cups and said, sit. I did. She sat across from me. Her hands were shaking. I didn't know, she said finally. I said nothing. Not exactly, she added. Not like that. You knew enough, I whispered. Her eyes welled. She's my daughter, too. So am I. She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to say it aloud. Emily, you don't understand. Olivia's always been fragile. She's impulsive.
She doesn't think.
She just feels. And sometimes that leads her to make mistakes. Mistakes? I repeated. She Ed my husband. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. My mother lowered her eyes. I kept going. She wore my robe. She made him breakfast. She smiled when I walked in and saw them together. She didn't accidentally fall into his arms, me.
She aimed.
And she fired. She wiped at her eyes. I never thought it would go that far. Then what did you think? I asked. When you saw the way she looked at him. When she came over in my clothes, called him Maddie, touched his arm in front of you. You think I didn't notice how quiet you got? How you never once stepped in? She's my baby. So what am I? I snapped. Collateral damage? She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing someone she hadn't met before. You've always been strong, Emily. I thought you could handle it. I laughed.
Cold.
Bitter. You thought I could handle what? Losing my husband? Watching my sister dismantle my marriage one laugh at a time? You thought I could carry that because I was the responsible one? You were always the one who didn't need me, she whispered. Olivia. Olivia needed more. My chest cracked open. There it was. The root of it all. The favoritism I'd swallowed since childhood. The endless forgiveness Olivia received for every mess, every mistake, every rebellion. I cleaned up after her all my life. I lied to our father for her. I paid her rent twice in college. I told her exes she was just scared of love when really, she was just careless with people. And now I was supposed to understand this too? I stood up.
I needed you, I said.
Just once. And you chose silence. She didn't stop me from leaving. I don't think she could. That night, I started digging. I pulled out old journals, photo albums, birthday cards. I looked at every moment Olivia had been around Matthew since the beginning. I found pictures from our wedding rehearsal where she had her hand on his shoulder. A shot from our engagement party where she stood too close. I read texts from her over the years, subtle jokes about how hot your man is. Better keep that one close, sis. Why hadn't I seen it? Why had I kept brushing it off? The next day, I met with a divorce attorney. I didn't tell Matthew.
I didn't know him that.
What I did do was start reclaiming my space. I changed the locks. I boxed up his things. I scrubbed our bedroom down until it no longer smelled like his cologne or her perfume. I took off my wedding ring and left it on the kitchen table where he'd find it when he came to beg or pretend to. But he didn't come. He texted once. I'm sorry.
I don't know what to say. I didn't respond.
Because there was nothing left to say. A week later, Olivia showed up. She didn't knock. Just walked in like she still lived in my life. She wore black sunglasses and a hoodie like some discount celebrity in hiding. I was in the living room, drinking coffee and reading through legal paperwork. She stood there for a moment before pulling the sunglasses off and saying, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer.
She sat anyway.
She looked thinner, paler, her confidence drained. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. I raised an eyebrow. You want to try that again? She sighed. It wasn't like I planned it. I didn't set out to ruin your marriage. It got complicated. You've been complicated since we were 10. She winced. Look, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I need you to know it wasn't about you. Of course it was about me, I snapped. It's always been about me. You needed to prove you could take what was mine. You needed to feel desired, wanted, loved, whatever sick craving you were feeding, and you used my life to do it. She didn't deny it. She didn't even pretend. She just whispered, I'm sorry. And I said something I never thought I would. I'm not. She looked up confused. I'm not sorry it happened. Because now I know. Now I finally see you for who you are and now I'm free. She stood slowly, like her bones were suddenly too heavy. Will you ever speak to me again? She asked. I smiled coldly. That depends. Do you plan on *****ing anyone else I love? She left without another word. I filed the papers 2 days later. I didn't cry when the lawyer handed them over. I didn't flinch when I signed my name. What I did do was walk into my closet, pick out a red dress I hadn't worn in years, and go out to dinner with my best friend. I drank wine. I laughed. I told her everything. And when she asked me what I was going to do next, I said, I'm going to live like I was never anyone's second choice. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't. Grief doesn't always show up wearing black. Sometimes, it comes in the form of silence, an empty closet where his clothes used to be, a cold side of the bed, a dinner table with one plate too many. Sometimes it doesn't feel like sadness at all. It feels like relief. like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. That's what it felt like in the weeks after the divorce papers were filed. I didn't cry over Matthew anymore. I didn't wait for his messages or hope he'd come crawling back. I didn't hope for closure. I didn't even want it. Closure is something you give to a relationship that deserves a soft ending. Matthew and Olivia didn't earn that. Instead, I focused on myself. It sounds cliché, I know. But when you've spent years organizing your life around another person's needs, learning how to center yourself feels revolutionary. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I began running in the mornings, headphones in, my feet pounding pavement like I could stomp out everything I hadn't said. I took long showers. I started cooking again, not frozen meals for two, but actual meals. Spices, garlic, fresh herbs. I let my hair dry naturally. I bought flowers just for myself. I started living like I liked who I was again. But it wasn't just me that changed. People around me did too. My dad called one morning. Just called. No texts, no warnings. He asked how I was. Asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. My first instinct was suspicion. And my second was rage. Where had he been when I needed him? Why had he gone quiet when everything in my life exploded? But I went. Because something in me needed to see the people who had stood silently beside Olivia, needed to know what they looked like now that the dust had settled. When I walked through the front door of my parents' house, it hit me how little had changed. Same plastic tablecloth. Same scent of lemongrass and fish sauce in the air. Same family photos on the wall. Except now, when I looked at the photo from my wedding day, I wanted to tear it down. My mother greeted me stiffly. My father gave me a long, searching hug. We sat at the table and ate in near silence until he said, "Your sister moved out of the city." I didn't respond. She's been staying with an old friend. Some retreat center near Santa Cruz. Says she wants to detox from herself. She'd detox from my marriage just fine, I muttered. My mom looked up. She made a mistake.
No, isnapat.
She made choices. Repeated ones. Over weeks. Maybe months. Don't you dare reduce it to a mistake. My father put a hand on my shoulder. We're not asking you to forgive. We're asking you to know we didn't condone it. But you didn't stop it either. He nodded slowly. You're right. We sat with that for a moment, the weight of their failure pressing down between us. Then my mom said something I didn't expect. She did it before. I looked up. What? She swallowed. She did it before. Olivia, she's done this. With someone else's fiancé. It was before your wedding. We thought she had changed. My skin went cold. You knew she had a pattern and you let her be in my wedding? She's your sister, my mother said weakly. We hoped love would settle her. You mean you hoped I'd be enough to fix her? My voice was shaking now and so were my hands. My father said nothing. He looked like he wanted to disappear. I stood. You didn't just fail me when it happened. You set me up for it. I walked out again, for what felt like the 100th time. That night, I stayed at a hotel. I couldn't go home. My house felt like too many memories and not enough comfort. The hotel was bland.
Beige walls.
Soft lighting. It felt like being nowhere, and that was exactly what I needed. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long my family had been hiding the truth. Wondering if Matthew knew about Olivia's past and still walked into it with open eyes. Wondering how many lies I had swallowed over the years in the name of harmony. And that was the moment I realized something. I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about legacy. It was about how women in my family had been raised to forgive quietly, love loudly, and swallow pain like pills we were too polite to refuse. I wanted to break that pattern. So I started writing. Not a journal. Not a blog. A story. My story. I wrote about the wedding. About the robe in the kitchen. About the perfume and the bed, and the smile Olivia gave me that night. I wrote every ugly, humiliating detail. And then I posted it anonymously in a private women's storytelling forum online. The comments came quickly. Hundreds. Then thousands. Some shared similar stories. Some wept for me. Some raged. But all of them told me one thing I had almost forgotten. I wasn't alone. For weeks, I kept writing. I changed names. But I told the truth. And one day, I got a message from a woman who said, "I think we know the same Olivia." She did the same thing to me. I asked for details. She gave them. And just like that, another thread unraveled. This woman had been engaged to a man Olivia met at a party 2 years before my wedding. She said Olivia had stayed at her apartment for a weekend, gotten close to her fiancé, and comforted him after a fight. The engagement was called off 3 weeks later. I couldn't breathe. I messaged back. Did she ever mention me? Her reply came quickly. She said her sister was too perfect, too safe, that she wanted what she had. I felt like throwing up. I had always believed Olivia envied me in small ways, my job, my stability, my so-called perfect life. But I never thought she'd say it out loud. I never thought she'd build a pattern of taking what I had just to feel like she could. I saved the messages. Not out of revenge, but out of survival. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was pathology, and I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. Weeks passed. My divorce finalized. I threw a dinner party for myself. Just a few close friends, candles, music, too much wine. I toasted to endings, to freedom, to finally hearing my own voice again. And when one of them asked, "What's next?" I said, "Whatever the hell I want." The next day, I got an email from a woman I didn't know. It read, I think I'm dating your ex-husband. He told me his name was Matt L. I saw a photo of you on his old Facebook, and something felt off.
Can we talk?
I froze. Then I replied,
Yes.
Let's talk. The email from the woman dating Matthew hit harder than I expected. Her name was Alana, and her message was short, polite, and razor-sharp in its clarity. He told me he was divorced, but he said it was mutual, friendly, that you two just grew apart. Then, I found your writing. It took me nearly a day to respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to explain to a stranger that the man she was dating had gutted me from the inside and then quietly rearranged the story to make himself the victim. When I finally wrote back, I kept it simple. He cheated on me with my sister. That's why the marriage ended. There was nothing mutual about it. She wrote back within minutes. I believe you. He kind of hinted that you were emotionally distant, that he tried to connect with you, but you were always busy, cold, career-obsessed. My hands trembled.
Of course he had said that.
It was the perfect lie, just enough truth to seem plausible. I'd been the one working late, tracking ovulation apps, fighting through doctor's appointments and fertility plans. I had been distant, but not out of neglect, out of hope, out of desperation to build a family he was silently destroying. The rage came back hot. But this time, it didn't take me under. This time, it became fuel. I didn't tell Alana what to do. I simply gave her the facts, sent her a copy of my divorce filing, and let her decide. She messaged me 2 days later. I broke up with him. Thank you. He's furious. Said you're poisoning people against him. I told him, no. She's just telling the truth. That message gave me more closure than any apology ever could. But the fire didn't stop burning there. Because I realized something else. Matthew had changed the narrative. Olivia had disappeared. And meanwhile, I had been left with a story that was only half told. I had written about the betrayal in anonymous forums, but I hadn't spoken publicly. I hadn't put my name on it. Until that moment, I hadn't wanted to.
But now?
Now I did. So I wrote the whole thing. Every detail. From the robe in the kitchen to the night I opened the guest room door. I wrote about Olivia's pattern, about my mother's silence, about the generational expectations that had raised me to be forgiving until it broke me. I wrote it like I was bleeding onto the screen. And then, without editing, without second-guessing, I published it, under my real name. The piece went viral in less than 48 hours. It wasn't the virality that mattered. It was the responses. Hundreds, then thousands, of comments from women who had been betrayed by people they trusted most.
Sisters.
Best friends. Cousins. Mothers. There was a theme in all their voices. The pain wasn't just from the betrayal, it was from the isolation. From the fact that no one talks about betrayal when it comes with blood ties. I had cracked something open. And I wasn't going to stop there. A podcast reached out. Then a magazine. A local therapist asked if I'd speak at her group workshop for women recovering from emotional trauma. I said yes to all of it. Every time I told my story, I felt lighter. Like I was shaking off the shame that had never belonged to me in the first place. And then, just when I thought I had climbed out of the fire, Olivia came back. She showed up at the end of one of my talks. I didn't see her at first. She waited in the back of the room, behind the others. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, like that would somehow make her invisible. It didn't. After everyone left, she approached. "You're making money off of this?" she asked, bitter. "I'm making meaning," I replied. "You should try it." Her lips curled. "You're acting like I ruined your life. You've clearly found a way to capitalize off it." "I'm not acting," I said. "You did ruin my life. You just weren't smart enough to realize I'd rebuild it without you." She rolled her eyes. "It wasn't that serious. You and Matthew were falling apart before I ever showed up." You know what's funny?" I said, stepping closer. "You always say things like that when you're cornered. You rewrite history like you weren't the one writing it in ink." "I came here to say sorry." "No, you didn't," I said. "You came here to make sure you weren't the villain in someone else's version of the story." She stood there for a moment, like she wanted to slap me or hug me, and didn't know which would hurt more. Then she said, "You've changed." I smiled. "Good." She walked away, and I let her go. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and looked at myself like I was meeting someone new. Someone stronger. Someone harder, but not bitter. Someone who had walked through fire and come out not burned, but forged. And for the first time, I spoke to my reflection without fear. "You deserved better," I said aloud. "And now you have it." I didn't need Matthew's closure. I didn't need Olivia's guilt. And I sure as hell didn't need my mother's permission to move forward. A month later, I got a call from my dad. He said he wanted to meet. We had lunch in a tiny faux restaurant tucked between a laundromat and a jewelry shop. He looked older, like guilt had worn him down. "I read your piece," he said. "All of it." I said nothing. He stirred his noodles and didn't look at me. "Your mother doesn't agree with you going public. She says you're airing dirty laundry." "She spent her life hiding stains," I said. "I'm just holding them up to the light." He nodded. "I think you were right to leave them both behind." "I didn't leave," I said. "They threw me out. I just stopped waiting for the door to open again." He looked at me then, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I believed he meant it. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But when we stood to leave, he paid for the meal and said, "You remind me of your grandmother. She used to raise hell when the family told her to stay quiet." I smiled. Sounds like someone I'd get along with. He walked me to my car. Just before I left, he asked, "What are you going to do next?" I looked out at the sky, soft blue, open. "I'm going to keep telling the truth," I said, "even if it makes people uncomfortable." Then I got in my car, drove home, and opened a blank page. Because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. There's a kind of silence that comes after the storm, one you don't notice at first. It's not the absence of chaos. It's the presence of clarity. It's the first deep breath you take when you realize you don't owe anyone your quiet anymore. That you don't have to flinch when your phone rings or wonder what someone means when they say, "You're so brave for speaking out." You don't have to translate yourself or shrink to fit back into a space you've already outgrown. That's the silence I lived in now. Not numb, not broken, just still. And in that stillness, I started to rebuild, not just my life, but the version of myself I used to believe had died the day I opened that bedroom door. It started with small things. I got rid of the bed. The one Matthew and I had shared. The one Olivia defiled. I donated it to a shelter, then burned the sheets in a fire pit one night while drinking wine and blasting Fleetwood Mac alone on the porch. That felt good. like cutting a toxic root out of my life and throwing it back to the dirt. I changed the paint in the house, moved furniture, gutted the closet. Every space that had once whispered memories of them, I filled with new color, new music, new scent. I started hosting dinners again. Not big ones, just friends. People who had held me up when everything fell. Women who didn't ask for details, but listened when I offered them. One night, someone said, "You don't even look like the same person," and I laughed because it was true. I wasn't. I had become something else. Not colder. Just clearer. Not harder. Just more whole. And somewhere in that healing, something unexpected happened. I started smiling again. Not the forced smile people wear when they say, "I'm fine." Not the polite smile you give relatives who ask why you're still single. A real smile. One that stretched across my face and surprised me in the mirror. One that made me laugh out loud, then laugh again at how strange it felt to hear myself sound joyful. I went to therapy. I journaled. I slept. I danced. I flirted with life, with freedom, with the idea that maybe not all intimacy ends in fire. And then, months later, someone new came into my life. His name was Caleb. I met him at a bookstore of all places, reaching for the same copy of a Mary Oliver poetry collection. We made a joke about fighting over who loved poetry more. He had the kind of smile that didn't ask for anything, just offered light. I wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't pushing. We talked. Then talked again. Then coffee. Then walks. Then long nights on my porch, curled in blankets, talking about the weird paths that bring people to the same point at just the right time. I told him everything. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And he never flinched. He didn't try to rescue me. He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "What happened to you was horrible, but what you did after, that's power." We weren't rushing. There was no label, just kindness. And after all the fire I'd walked through, kindness felt like the rarest treasure in the world. One morning, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a card, plain white, in Olivia's handwriting. I read everything. I hate you for it, but I also know you were right.
Aw.
I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her admission was never going to erase what she did. It wasn't going to rewrite the year I lost to betrayal. But it was enough for me to close the chapter completely. To know I wasn't imagining it. To know that truth, no matter how painful, always leaves a stain the liars can't scrub off. A few weeks later, I stood on a small stage at a women's conference, holding a microphone in one hand and my notes in the other. The room was full, quiet, expectant. I looked out at them and said, "I used to think the worst betrayal came from strangers. That when someone hurt you, the wound would make sense because there was no history. But betrayal by blood? That's something else. It's a slow drowning. And if you're not careful, it convinces you that your silence is more valuable than your truth." I paused. I spent years being the good girl, the peacemaker, the woman who stayed quiet to keep the family peace. Until I realized, there is no peace in swallowing your own story. There is no redemption in setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I looked down at my notes, then folded them. I didn't need them. I don't stand here as a woman who was destroyed. I stand here as someone who was set free. Because when I caught my sister in bed with my husband, I didn't just lose a marriage. I lost an illusion. And in its place, I found myself. The crowd stood.
Tears.
Applause. I stepped down from the stage lighter than I'd felt in years. Months passed. Caleb and I traveled together. Nothing wild. Just road trips. Mountains. Ocean. One weekend, we stood on a beach in Big Sur, barefoot in the sand, the sun cutting gold across the water. He looked at me and said, "Do you think you've forgiven them?" I thought for a long moment. I don't think forgiveness is the goal. He nodded. Then what is? Peace, I said. Peace is the goal. And I have it. He didn't say anything else. Just held my hand and smiled like he already knew. I never saw Olivia again. I heard from others that she moved across the country.
Took a new name. Changed jobs again.
She'd always been good at vanishing, but this time, I didn't chase her. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to keep the story whole.
Some people are chapters.
Some are warnings. She was both. Matthew faded too. Last I heard, he was single. Alone. Still telling versions of the story, where he's the one who got away. Let him. I stopped needing the world to know my side. Because I told it.
Loud. Clear.
And once you tell the truth, you don't have to keep proving it. Now, when people ask me what happened, I tell them this. I lost my marriage, my sister, and the version of myself that thought loyalty meant staying silent. But in return, I found my voice, my peace, and a life where I'm not afraid of the mirror anymore. And that's everything.